Empire State Weekly, I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. New York State is set to receive over $100 million as part of a multi-state settlement with the vape company Juul. Company agreeing to the massive payout over its alleged involvement in underage vaping in the epidemic. As part of the settlement, Juul has agreed to pay $462 million to 6 states and Washington, D.C. New York receiving the lion's share here, $112 million to be paid out over 8 years. That money will be going towards programs aimed at helping young New Yorkers quit vaping. New York Attorney General Letitia James explains why the state sued the company over its deceptive marketing, which she says specifically targeted young people, teenagers.
The e-cigarette company falsely led consumers to believe that its vapes were safer than cigarettes and contained less nicotine. However, just one pod of Juul contains as much nicotine as a whole pack of cigarettes.
All right, joining us now to help break down the legal details surrounding the case. Once again, we're joined by attorney Andrew Safranko. Andy, thanks for coming in. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
So the Juul settlement, this was a big case brought about by New York Attorney General Letitia James. 6 states involved, as well as the District of Columbia. We're talking over a $400 million settlement. With a case like this, does it benefit a company like this to, even though the amount seems outrageous, to settle rather than have it drag on?
So it is a massive settlement, and what goes into settlement discussions and negotiations is what is the end play. If they go to trial, are there going to be greater potential fines and penalties and verdicts that have to go on? And what a settlement does is end the case where you know what is going to happen. So in this case, they chose the $462 million settlement, knowing that if they went to trial, they could have got more, potentially could have been less, but it's a guarantee, and it ends the case and it ends the litigation. And it's my understanding in this particular case that almost 47 of the 50 states have now completed some type of litigation against Juul. So it's essentially for $1 billion, Juul's paid out to all the states across the country. New York certainly getting the most lion's share of it.
Yeah, from what we understand, $112 million or so paid out over 8 years. That money, we're told, will go towards programs to help young people stop vaping. So this is an e-cigarette company, fairly new, really only been on the scene, I think, less than 10 years. And all of a sudden they get hit with these problems. Of course, the states are alleging that they were marketing specifically towards children, be it with young people in ads, flavors of the vapes. So they're still making money, clearly able to handle, a payout like this.
Yeah, so the Juul, the e-cigarettes, is certainly reminiscent of the big tobacco settlements in the late 90s, early 2000s, where all the big tobacco companies settled for millions and millions of dollars, but yet you still see people smoking, you'll still see people, using Juuls and vaping. And the question is whether or not this amount of money will affect and eliminate or reduce the amount of young people vaping.
Right. And one of the stipulations, too, is the restrictions on their advertisements. We heard Letitia James talking about how they have to crack down and specifically how they market their product, correct? And that it will be behind store shelves now where it's sold.
Right. And they, New York at least raised the age to 21 to purchase. Now a little stricter guidelines if people are purchasing online, limitations as to the number of vapes that people can purchase online. And as part of the settlement within New York, at least, there appears to be a 5% of the stores that are selling vapes have to be under some sort of an audit. So I'm interested to see how that rolls out. Certainly there's laws in effect now if you're selling underage, people cigarettes or vapes and Juuls and alcohol to the extent, but what's going to happen if somebody during these audits, these stores doing an audit are over the limit or not doing what they're supposed to do with checking the age for people that are purchasing.
The consequences for the shop owner in that case, right?
Correct.
Are there any, and you may have already answered this question, further repercussions for Juul out of this, or does this now essentially kind of end things?
This should certainly end things for Juul, except if they don't abide by the settlement agreement. So There may be a few more states out there that will engage in litigation if they have not, or I would expect those cases to be resolved. But it certainly puts them on notice if they violate any of the rules of these agreements. There must be certain penalty phases for that, or subject them to additional litigation in the future.
Juul certainly not the only e-cig manufacturer in the country. They just got the attention here, became one of the biggest, I guess, simply because of the design of their product, and became very popular with young people. For the other companies out there that also make these products, and we know Big Tobacco makes their own as well, when they look at this case and they look at what happened here, does that give them pause for how they do business?
You would hope so, right? But it ultimately goes down to a person's choice. Is somebody going to smoke? Is somebody going to vape? I think Juul really got punished because they went out initially and said that this type of nicotine product was healthier than a cigarette and the nicotine involved in a cigarette, and it's certainly proven not to be the case. And I think what's ultimately going to happen down the future is, as these cases progress, as these children get older, become adults, what lifetime and long-standing consequences they have.
We saw especially with the Big Tobacco cases, as you said, they're still in business, people are still smoking, but we see far less of it, especially, I notice it especially in the entertainment industry. You don't see people smoking in TV or in films anymore. So the culture does shift a bit, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and I think that's how, people will look at this as a glass half full, half empty, right? Is this a great settlement? What does it really do? Is it going to affect the world, right? But if one person stops vaping or doesn't pick up a vape, then this type of a case is successful. You're never going to eliminate somebody smoking or or vaping.
And I think one of the biggest arguments too when these vapes first came on the scene was that it was a good thing for somebody who had been smoking a regular cigarette for years to kind of help wean them off that. And that all of a sudden it just became this thing with underage kids who thought that it was better for them than a cigarette, and we learned that really wasn't the case, especially when it came to the nicotine levels.
Exactly, and I think that's how it originally came on the scene so strongly, is it was marketed and advertised as being better for someone than an actual cigarette.
Yeah, and we've done numerous stories here about the problems with kids in school, vaping in bathrooms, and everything else, much like they used to go and duck a butt in the bathroom back in the day too, right? Andrew Safranko, thank you so much for coming in. As always, we appreciate it.
Great, thank you for having me.
I appreciate
your
insight. Governor Hochul announces her second